steeped in grace and reverence, let us open ourselves to celestial wonder. A cascade of sorrow glimmers down the chosen soul's cheeks, poised to expose a truth that will upend everything they know. But before that shattering disclosure can dawn, we must uncover the hidden events that unfolded behind the curtain of their rueful lament. Only by delving into that unseen tapestry of regret can we brace ourselves for the wrenching transformation that awaits. Seeker, those droplets aren't born of genuine penitence, but are the first cracks in a shell that's been weakening long before they even noticed. What lies beyond that shell will shatter every belief they've held about who truly pulls the strings here. Yet before that revelation dawns, remember, three unseen currents are gathering around their world, forces they couldn't possibly foresee. An unnameable unease bubbling beneath their awareness is the first hidden current, felt but not understood. The strange coincidences that have crept into their life over the past weeks form the second tide, casually shrugged off as chance. And it's the third surge, invisible until this very instant, that will illuminate why this convergence was destined from the start. You see, what they are going through is not a case of unlucky events or random chaos. Everything that has been developing since the first time they chose to push your limits has come to a head. Every sarcastic remark, every dismissive chuckle, every attempt to extinguish your light, all of it was being captured on tape by forces they were unaware of. And you were the only cosmic joke they believed they were handling. How wildly incorrect they were. Something with perfect memory, unlimited patience, and zero tolerance for the spiritual arrogance they've been demonstrating was measuring them while they were busy measuring your patience, figuring out how far they could push, and planning their next manipulation. Chosen One, your lineage is more than just a source of power. For those who would abuse their proximity to it, it bears something even more dangerous, something that had lain dormant until this very moment, when their disdain passed a line that should never be crossed. However, we're getting ahead of ourselves, because you need to comprehend the three different stages of what's happening before that sleeping monster fully rises. Only the Phase 1 tremors have affected them. Those odd coincidences they disregarded, the slight setbacks they ascribed to poor luck, and the minor electronic faults they ascribed to technology were all part of Phase 1's stealthy unraveling. This was the universe's subtle warning system, cosmic opportunities for course adjustment cloaked in commonplace annoyances. Despite experiencing these tremors, they were unable to identify the pattern. Although they are not yet aware of the symptoms, Phase 2 is already underway. They will learn why their tears are only the beginning of something far deeper in Phase 3. You were never alone in this, Chosen One, and they're going to discover that your hallucinations were actually forewarnings of what was coming together in dimensions they are unable to access. Champion, when you sow a generous gift of $20, $50, or more through the Super Thanks button, you're releasing heaven's resources into this ministry and positioning yourself to receive God's abundant provision. The scriptures assure us, "And my God will supply every need of yours according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus." Philippians 4 verse 19. So give with confidence today and watch his supernatural supply manifest in your life. Long before your physical form took its first breath, generations of warriors, healers, seers, and spiritual gladiators were forming an entire ancestral army in realms beyond their perception, while they were brushing off your spiritual awareness as fantasy. These individuals did not simply pass away and go on. These were sentient beings who actively invested in the safety of their ancestors despite transcending physical limitations. They have been observing every exchange, recording every act of disrespect, and figuring out the exact moment at which intervention would be both necessary and disastrous. And that time has come. It took time to establish your connection. It was created by recurring cycles of creatures who triumphed over darkness. More than knowledge or ancestry, they left behind technology, spiritual technologies that are now emerging with such accuracy that your opponents would be terrified if they had the spiritual intelligence to understand what's truly going on. What would completely destroy any remaining trust, however, is that each ancestor who experienced such resistance left behind particular procedures that were meant to be triggered when their descendants came against this kind of spiritual battle. You have instructions in your DNA that their spiritual emptiness could never duplicate, technologies their limited awareness cannot detect, much less defend against, and frequencies its consciousness can never reach. And those old defenses are kicking in right now. They are totally unprepared for Phase 2, which is the methodical removal of the cosmic protection they were unaware they were getting. The majority of individuals are unaware that they are being softly steered away from catastrophes, urged in the direction of wiser choices, and inexplicably diverted from disastrous ones. Until that support stops, they have been functioning on spiritual well-being they were unaware of, an all-pervasive GPS that saved them from catastrophic devastation, and unseen safety nets that stopped their conceit from causing utter disaster. They thought it was their own brilliance, chance, or happenstance, because everything worked so quietly. However, the universe starts to rescind its protection, not as a punishment, but as a natural result. When someone consistently disregards a divine vessel, consistently chooses exploitation over evolution, and repeatedly makes fun of what they ought to respect. See what transpires when their reality is stripped of its training wheels. Though they haven't yet made the connection, they are already beginning to notice the effects. Strange behavior from electronics around them, conversations that halt when they enter rooms, opportunities that vanish without explanation, private thoughts that become public knowledge, health problems that appear despite medical clearance, and relationships that fall apart for reasons they cannot explain. True spiritual seclusion, however, is another phenomenon that is emerging that will blow their minds. Not merely social rejection or loneliness, but the deafening stillness that descends when someone who has consistently rejected heavenly instruction no longer receives it. The fact that the invisible forces are only beginning to work is what will truly destroy what little sanity they still have. Because your spiritual skills were genuinely useful technology that could destroy physical realities, even as they were busy discounting them as theoretical ideas. Your ancestral connections were physical links to forces that functioned outside dimensional boundaries, despite their assumption that they were metaphorical poetry. Through the methodical activation of defense mechanisms that have been ingrained in your spiritual DNA for just such a circumstance, they will soon experience what happens when someone with a connection to generational power decides they've had enough. Not through direct confrontation, which would be below your level of operation. Yellow heart if you're moved by divine love. Now is the moment to share it. Click the Super Thanks button on YouTube and contribute $50 or more to help us broadcast God's blessings far and wide. Every act of generosity you make is being watched in heaven and will return to you 100-fold. Your ancestors were aware that this time would arrive. They faced comparable difficulties during their own lives and left particular instructions written in your energy blueprint. Instructions that are currently operating with the accuracy of cosmic software intended to deal with threats to selected vessels. The thing that will scare them the most, though, is that they aren't only precautions. They serve as teaching aids. Each consequence they encounter is designed to teach them a particular lesson about the forces they have chosen to disregard. Every barrier that stands in their way is intended to demonstrate to them what they were shielded from. Every door that closes in their face is a reminder of the chances they lost because of their conceit. For them, the most terrifying thing is not what they can see, but what is still invisible but undeniable. The feeling that eyes beyond their physical reach are watching them, the nightmares that wake them up screaming, sweating, and unable to describe what they have experienced, but profoundly shaken by experiences their conscious mind cannot comprehend. The things that move for no apparent reason, the electronics that break down only for them, the muttered names they hear when no one else is present. This makes the message very clear. It's protected. Treat others with dignity or suffer unfathomable repercussions. There are no longer any gentle prods toward enlightenment. There is no sound to the instinctive warnings about hazardous routes. The synchronicity that kept catastrophes at bay is no more. They are freed from the enigmatic barriers that kept them from annihilation. Every choice they make now has unavoidable repercussions. Every route they take leads them straight to the very thing they were shielded from. They're working without the unseen help they never recognized, so every tactic they take backfires with mathematical accuracy. They are ready to have their blood run cold because of this. They saw your tenderness and assumed you were whole. They saw your forbearance and thought it was a weakness. They felt your generosity was a weakness after experiencing it. What cosmic error? What is spiritual blindness? The majority of people merely access parts of their actual nature and exist in pieces. They are either pure shadows that cannot provide illumination or pure light that cannot create the requisite gloom. They function as half-complete beings in a world that can only be fully navigated by totality. However, you are the complete spectrum. Words have the power to mend the deepest wounds, and whispers have the power to shatter entire reality. You can offer judgment that changes people's fates or compassion that changes lives. You are the calm wind on a summer day and the hurricane that reshapes coasts, the soothing rain that nourishes the garden and the lightning strike that fractures the powerful oak, the surgical precision that excises spiritual cancer, and the healing touch that mends broken spirits. They've only prepared for one part of you, so this total duality terrifies them. All they have done is plot against your empathy. They have just strengthened their defenses against your nurturing nature. The other half of your spiritual architecture, the side that doesn't compromise, negotiate, or provide second chances to people who waste the first one, was something they never expected to encounter. You were evaluating their deservingness while they were evaluating your generosity. You were figuring out just when your boundaries would be enforced, while they were figuring out how far they might push them. You were watching their pattern with the disinterested accuracy of a cosmic surgeon, choosing where to make the first cut, while they were planning their next move. The realization that will haunt their nightmares is that they have simultaneously woken both factions. The tender, caring part of you, the one they took advantage of, has moved aside, not vanished, but merely made room for something else to surface, something they caught a glimpse of but wrote off as unattainable. They're going to learn the difference between power that makes an announcement and power that doesn't, because they didn't understand that your quiet was always calculated and never an act of submission. Your self-control was the patient observation of a spiritual predator waiting for the ideal opportunity to attack, not weakness. Your generosity was the surgical accuracy of someone who knows precisely when to help and when to hurt. It wasn't naivete, because they were not spiritually developed enough to see your latent strength. They were unable to do so. Like people who are tone-deaf and attempt to enjoy a symphony, they had no spiritual receptors to understand the enormity of what was in front of them. They saw your soft exterior and thought it was all of you, never realizing that there was something far stronger hiding beneath your kind exterior. Your patience was the deliberate restraint of someone who knows that timing is crucial in cosmic combat, not fear. Your pardon was the kindness of someone powerful enough to destroy, but sensible enough to provide alternatives. It was a consent. However, they interpreted all gifts as signs of weakness. Every grace they received was seen as a challenge to do better. They converted every instance of tolerance into permission to treat others with more contempt. And they were getting closer to waking up something they were never prepared to deal with every misunderstanding. Now observe the cosmic correction, the big reversal, which occurs when universal forces bring situations polluted by spiritual hubris back into balance. Once they were standing over you, obscuring your light with their bloated egos, casting shadows with their arrogance, and staring down with disdain from positions they somehow earned but never merited. At one point, they rewrote stories to make themselves appear as heroes when they were the villains, spoke over you, interrupted your knowledge, and disregarded your insights. However, divine justice functions on a timescale that is incomprehensible to humans. The cosmos aligns. It doesn't hurry. It waits instead of forgetting. It arranges ideal moments of reckoning where the truth cannot be refuted, distorted, or denied. It does not pardon without accountability. They now shudder as the foundation they stand on, which was constructed on deceit and exploitation, starts to fracture with irreparable fault lines. Their legitimate owners recover the borrowed energy they have been using to run their business. In public, their masks start to come off, exposing the real faces they had been trying so hard to conceal. Dove brothers and sisters, everything done in faith multiplies in God's abundance. Use the Super Thanks feature to donate $100 today and join this sacred mission. When your roots are grounded in Him, your fruit will flourish, and your offering becomes a seed that bears blessed harvests. The reality that will crush their last illusions is that you were the test in this tale, not the victim. Each encounter with you was a test of their spiritual deservingness. They were failing a cosmic test. They were unaware they were taking every time they opted for disrespect over reverence. Chosen one, the cosmos never makes a mistake with its appointments. They failed horribly because you were placed in their path for a specific reason, not to be defeated but to expose their true nature. The fact that you attempted to assist them in passing, however, will make their failure even more terrible when they eventually realize it. In reality, every caution you gave was a step toward spiritual development. Every limit you established gave them a chance to show respect and establish a closer bond. You gave them the opportunity to understand the heavenly grace that permeated your presence with each instant of patience. You weren't merely putting up with their actions. You were providing them with numerous chances to change. You were giving people opportunities to rise above their spiritual limits, not just putting up with their disrespect. Not only were you surviving their attacks, but you were also providing them with avenues for atonement. Despite their inability to see, they preferred ridicule than development. Exploitation was chosen over evolution. Dominance was more important to them than progress. And with every decision they made, they strayed more from the very enlightenment they so desperately sought, but were always denied. The very elevation they professed to pursue, the very power they claimed to have, because the forces defending you react to patterns rather than just direct attacks. Phase 3 becomes unavoidable. Additionally, something that functions outside of human intervention or negotiation has been triggered by their pattern of disrespect, exploitation, and spiritual arrogance. The tears that are currently running down their face are not the result of sincere regret. Rather, they are the body's reaction to their neurological system identifying a danger that their consciousness is unable to comprehend. Their mind won't comprehend what their body understands. Something that doesn't forget, doesn't sleep, and doesn't bargain has been woken. When their emotional manipulation fails, see how quickly those tears turn into anger. See how easily their grief turns into resentment when they aren't given forgiveness right away. Observe how their regret turns into retaliation when their performance fails to produce the expected outcomes. This is strategic theater intended to avoid repercussions that have already been initiated. It is not genuine sorrow. However, the cosmic ledger is not affected by performances. Manipulators are not negotiable under universal law. Emotional blackmail or crocodile tears are not excuses for divine justice. When the complete accounting is due, they will be completely destroyed, since they have been using a cosmic credit system that they were unaware of. Forces that keep flawless records in several dimensions were monitoring every incidence of stolen insight, every moment of borrowed charm, and every display of second-hand spiritual authority. The universe has a vibrant economy that is considerably more advanced than any financial system on Earth. The accuracy with which every encounter, every transaction, and every taking and giving of spiritual resources is recorded would astound them if they had the consciousness to understand it. They believed that their spiritual thievery was going unpunished. They thought they were able to control cosmic resources. They believed that by using deft deception and emotional manipulation, they were outwitting universal law. They were unaware that the cosmos never forgets, never sleeps, and always collects what is due. They projected authority they never had, formed their confidence from resources they never earned, and based their sense of self on foundations that belonged to others. They came up with complex spiritual Ponzi schemes that made people believe they had what they had taken from people who were actually linked. All energy debts must finally be balanced, however, according to global law. Perfect records that cannot be changed, manipulated, or deleted are kept by cosmic accounting. Differences between a person's projected and actual possessions are never overlooked by divine auditors. And now for the audit they didn't anticipate. Both subtle and dramatic manifestations of their spiritual bankruptcy are occurring. The spark behind their eyes, which was never really theirs, has vanished, leaving behind empty stares that no one can believe. Their charisma, which they previously possessed but are no longer able to access, has vanished, leaving behind stale energy that turns off rather than draws. The most terrible loss, however, is the silence they now endure, the deafening lack where divine direction ought to be, the empty space where cosmic communication used to flow, the hollow place where spiritual connection ought to thrive, but is unable to break through barriers they themselves created. They will always be accompanied by this stillness. They will live primarily in this emptiness. Their relationship will be the most faithful during this separation. What's going to worsen their spiritual bankruptcy is that they're going to realize that what they're going through is cosmic schooling rather than merely personal consequences. Their resistance to you is only one example of how the universe uses everything to impart lessons that have an impact on many different dimensions. Their demise serves as a lesson for other unconscious entities who may be tempted to do the same errors. Unbeknownst to you, your worst adversaries turned into cosmic elevators, universal promoters who put you right where you were always meant to be. You were positioned for tasks that only you can do with spiritual catapults. Resistance that builds cosmic calluses and strengthens spiritual muscles is one of the resources that the divine intelligence utilizes to arrange progress in preparation for your next phase. Despite thinking they were undermining the cosmic plan, they were perfectly suited to their role within it. Their assaults turned into your armor. Their difficulties become your course material. Their animosity served as the catalyst for your rise to heights they will never be able to understand, much less reach. They're going to learn something else, though, which will finish their education. They were fighting the cosmos, not you. They were declaring war on the forces that uphold cosmic order each time. They opted for irreverence rather than reverence. They were violating the principles of spiritual reality in all realms each time they chose exploitation over growth. The vessel through which cosmic justice showed what happens when limited beings test unlimited power. The chosen tool through which divine law educated those who believed they could act outside spiritual principles without consequence. You were simply the focal point where their unconscious arrogance collided with conscious universal forces. They were trying to combat forces they couldn't see, comprehend, or properly engage, which is why their failure was always inevitable. Not because you were stronger than them, even if you are. To a fight in space, they brought human weaponry. They battled celestial foes with earthly tactics. They tackled limitless problems with finite thought. Before the first battle started, the result was known. Glowing star yearning to witness God's miracles firsthand? Plant your spiritual seed now by contributing $100 or more through the YouTube Super Thanks button. Your offering lights the path for others and echoes through His divine plan, bringing His light into every step you take. You see, chosen one, their tears aren't only wiping their faces, rather, they're hydrating, nourishing, and feeding something that has been waiting for this precise moment of weakness at the back of their minds. Furthermore, redemption is not what is developing in that nourished ground. It's not pardoning. It's the whole understanding of what they've lost, not a second opportunity, a fresh start, or a clean slate. They still don't understand this, though, and it will make their present suffering seem like a mild prelude. They lost something much more essential than you, something that can never be recovered, replaced, or reproduced once it's gone. Their cosmic citizenship was taken away from them. Conscious creatures functioning in various dimensions are part of a large network, bound together by spiritual kinship, respect, and acknowledgement. There's no self-promotion on this network. It doesn't send invitations or recruit new members. It merely recognizes those who exhibit the spiritual intelligence required for membership and subtly denies recognition to others whose decisions make them unworthy. Their closeness to you had given them temporary visiting privileges, but they were never complete members of this network. They might gain access to certain advantages, get subliminal direction, feel unknowable protection, and take use of synchronicity that appeared to be random but was actually well planned. However, those benefits come with unwritten rules. Respect sentient creatures. Acknowledge divine appointment when it happens. Revere the sacred in all its manifestations. Choose development over stagnation, wisdom over ignorance, and connection over exploitation. They repeatedly, flagrantly, arrogantly broke every single condition. The network has now unanimously decided to permanently exclude them. When the universe stops working in their favor and starts treating them with the same disregard they once exhibited to forces they ought to have admired, they will finally know what life is like. However, something else is growing in that quiet, something they can feel but cannot identify, something that becomes stronger with every tear they shed, every sad gesture of regret they never truly experience, and every frantic attempt to win back your favor, horror. Instead of being afraid of you specifically, they are afraid of what you stand for, a universe that is far more intricate, enigmatic, and spiritually advanced than their narrow perspective ever permitted them to imagine. Fear of forces they cannot control, manipulate, or comprehend, and fear of vast unknown territories of existence they never suspected existed. They will finally comprehend in that fear why you attempted to warn them, why you gave advice they disregarded, why you offered opportunities for course correction they sneered at, and why you offered knowledge they derided. You were attempting to shield them from this unavoidable clash between their unconscious conceit and aware universal forces, not to exert control over them. However, they made their own decision. They choose their own fate. With every decision they made to disregard what they ought to have valued, reject what they ought to have accepted, and destroy what they ought to have treasured, they wrote their own demise. However, you are no longer accountable for it. Chosen one, you've finished your task here. We've provided your lesson. You've achieved your goal. The cosmic energies that flow through you have brought equilibrium back, taught the unconscious, and once again shown why chosen vessels are shielded by forces that are incomprehensible to humans. Now that the consequences of their own decisions have perfectly unfolded, you can leave with the knowledge that divine law has been obeyed, universal justice has been served, and spiritual truth has been made clear. Additionally, keep in mind that their cries were never about losing you as you move toward goals they will never achieve, into fates they will never understand, and into horizons they will never attain. They were about recognizing they had been standing in the midst of something great while dismissing it as commonplace, and about suddenly seeing you clearly for the first time. The cosmic comedy is self-evident. They never created any illumination of their own, since they expended so much energy attempting to dim your light. They never developed true strength, because they spent so much time trying to sap your power. They never learned how to create, because they spent so much time exploiting. They now realize what they could have become if they had decided to learn from you rather than learn to use you, in the quiet of your absence. However, that chance is now gone. The door is closed. The invitation has been revoked for good. They're right where they want it to be, and you're free. Chosen one,